I've been driving long-haul routes for close to 15 years now, mostly cutting through the desolate desert highways of Nevada, Utah, and Arizona. When you spend that much time isolated in a metal cabin, watching nothing but white lines get swallowed by the black asphalt under the glow of your high beams, your mind starts to play tricks on you. You learn to embrace the loneliness, but you also learn that the desert has a dark side, secrets that only reveal themselves to the tired eyes of night shift truckers after 3 a.m. It was mid-October, right around the time the desert nights turn from uncomfortably warm to bitterly freezing. I was hauling a massive, heavy load of structural steel from Salt Lake City down to a construction site just outside of Reno, Nevada. It was a route I had driven dozens of times before, mostly via Interstate 80, but because of a massive fuel tanker accident that had shut down the main interstate for at least 12 hours, dispatch routed me onto an old, 2-lane state highway that cut straight through the heart of the empty wilderness. This road didn't have gas stations every 20 miles. It didn't have cellular towers. It was just a cracked, uneven ribbon of black asphalt surrounded by miles of jagged rocks, low sagebrush, and absolute, crushing darkness. By the time I hit the halfway mark, it was roughly 3:15 a.m. These initial rush of caffeine from my thermos had completely worn off, leaving behind a heavy burning exhaustion behind my eyes. The only sound inside the cabin was the steady, hypnotic rumble of my 18-wheeler's engine and the faint, rhythmic clicking of the dashboard clock. I was desperately looking for a wide dirt turnout or an old abandoned lot where I could safely pull over, set the air brakes, and close my eyes for an hour. But the shoulders of this how-to highway were incredibly narrow, dropping off into deep, rocky ditches on both sides. Driving an 80,000-pound rig into one of those meant flipping the trailer and getting stranded in the middle of nowhere. So I had no choice but to keep pushing forward, my high beams cutting through the eerie, empty blackness. Up ahead, about a half-mile away, I noticed a strange flicker of light on the right side of the road. As the truck closed the distance, the shape became clearer. It wasn't a standard highway sign or a broken-down vehicle. It was an old, dilapidated gas station from the 1960s. The building was completely ruined. The sheet roof had partially collapsed. The windows were shattered into jagged teeth, and the old fuel pumps were rusted into hollow metal skeletons. But remarkably, one single overhead fluorescent light fixture above the old garage bay was functioning, flickering violently with a high-pitched, buzzing hum that I could hear even over the sound of my engine. More importantly, there was a wide, flat concrete apron in front of the ruins. It was the perfect spot to park. Relieved, I slowed the massive truck down, turned the steering wheel, and pulled the rig onto the cracked concrete. Parking parallel to the dark highway, I left the running lights on, pulled the yellow air brake knob, which filled the cabin with a loud, satisfying hiss, and let out a deep breath. I leaned my head back against the seat, closing my eyes, letting the vibration of the idling diesel engine soothe my aching muscles. I must have drifted off for about 10 minutes when a sudden, sharp static burst from my CB radio snapped me wide awake. Crackle. Shh. I blinked heavily, looking at the small green screen of the radio unit mounted above my head. The volume was turned down low, but the static was incredibly loud, indicating a very close transmitter. I reached up to turn it off, assuming it was just atmospheric interference from the desert hills. But before my fingers could touch the knob, a voice broke through the white noise. It wasn't the typical gruff, friendly voice of a fellow trucker. It was soft, incredibly slow, and completely devoid of any emotion. It sounded like someone reading words off a page without understanding what they meant. Truck, parked, at the pumps, blue cab, trailer number 479. My hand froze in midair. A cold, heavy wave of dread immediately dropped into the pit of my stomach. My truck had a deep blue cabin, and the small white stencil on the side of my silver trailer read exactly that. 479. Someone was watching me. I looked out my left window toward the highway. Total blackness. I looked through my windshield at the collapsed gas station structure bathed in the flickering fluorescent light. There were no cars parked anywhere. There was no cover, no trees, no fences. Just flat desert for miles. Where could anyone be hiding close enough to read the small numbers on the side of my trailer in the dark? I grabbed the microphone, my knuckles grandparent turning white. This is Big Blue. Who is this? If you're playing a joke, it ain't funny, driver. I'm tired and I don't want any trouble. Over. There was no immediate response, just the heavy rhythmic hiss of static. I stared intently into my side mirrors, trying to scan the darkness behind the trailer. Nothing. But then, the radio crackled again. The voice was slightly louder this time, but still completely flat, like a voice generator. The driver is awake. He is looking in the mirrors. He is afraid. My breath caught in my throat. My heart began to hammer violently against my ribs, the sound echoing in my ears. This person wasn't just close. They had a direct, unobstructed line of sight into my cabin. They could see my head moving. I reached up and frantically flipped the switch to turn on my incredibly bright, roof-mounted off-road spot lamps. The powerful white beams exploded into the night, illuminating the entire perimeter of the old gas station with blinding clarity. What I saw made my blood instantly run cold. Inside the ruined garage bay of the gas station, directly underneath the flickering fluorescent light, was an old wooden chair. Sitting in that chair was a man. He was wearing a plain, completely clean gray jumpsuit, but his face was completely hidden behind a crude, oversized wooden mask shaped like a smiling human face. The kind of mask you might see in an old theater troupe, with hollow, empty black circles cut out for the eyes. He was holding a small, handheld CB radio unit in his left lapel, and in his right hand, he was casually holding a long, rusted iron crowbar, tapping it slowly against the concrete floor. Clink, clink, clink. Through the open garage door, his hollow mask was pointed directly at my face. He didn't move. He didn't stand up. He just sat there, in the middle of the ruins, miles away from civilization, watching me through the empty eye holes of that wooden smile. Get out of the truck, driver. The flat voice droned through the CB speaker. Come, look at the face. A wave of pure, primal survival instinct washed over my exhaustion. I didn't say a single word back into the microphone. I dropped the mic onto the floorboard, jammed my foot down on the clutch, and violently pushed the yellow air brake valve back in. The truck groaned as the brakes released. I slammed the transmission into low gear and stomped on the gas pedal. The heavy 18-wheeler roared, the massive tires screaming and spinning against the cracked concrete of the apron as I tried to build momentum. As the truck began to surge forward toward the highway exit, I glanced at my passenger side mirror to make sure my trailer was clearing the rusted ruins. But as the cabin passed the edge of the old brick structure, I realized the man in the chair was no longer there. The wooden chair was empty, overturned on the concrete floor. Suddenly, a loud, terrifying thud echoed from the back of my truck, followed by the metallic screech of tearing aluminum. Bang! Something, or someone, had leaped from the low, collapsed roof of the gas station, structured directly onto the top of my moving trailer. The sheer weight of the impact caused the entire cab to shudder. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I forced the gears up, shifting rapidly as the truck broke onto the main highway, accelerating to 40, 50, then 60 miles per hour into the dark desert night. Through the roof of my cabin, I could hear a frantic, heavy scraping sound, like heavy boots scrambling for grip on the smooth metal surface of the trailer roof, moving slowly toward the front of the rig. Get out! Get out! Get out! The CB radio began to repeat over and over again, the static growing so intense the small speaker sounded like it was going to burst. I reached up with a trembling hand and completely ripped the power wires out of the back of the radio unit, plunging the cabin into sudden, heavy silence, except for the roar of the wind and the engine. I kept my foot pinned to the floorboard for 30 minutes straight, pushing the truck to its absolute mechanical limit, ignoring the warning lights flashing on my dashboard. Finally, in the far distance, the bright, welcoming neon lights of a massive 24-hour travel plaza appeared on the horizon. I blasted into the well-lit parking lot, slamming on the brakes, right in front of the main entrance where dozens of other truckers and security guards were standing around. The sudden noise and crowd felt like a shield. I climbed out of the cab, my legs shaking so violently I almost collapsed onto the asphalt. A few older drivers noticed my pale face and shattered expression and walked over, asking if I had blown a tire. Without speaking, I pointed toward the top of my silver trailer. The security guards shone their heavy flashlights up onto the roof. The man was gone, likely having jumped off, when the truck slowed down near the town limits. But right at the very edge of the roof, directly above my driver's side cabin door, the thick aluminum sheeting had been violently peeled back and hacked away. Embedded deep into the metal structure, holding a small piece of torn gray fabric, was a rusted iron crowbar. If I had stayed at that abandoned gas station for even one more minute, or if I had slowed down on that dark highway, that wooden masked figure would have broken through the roof of my cab. While I was driving, I finished that delivery, but the next morning, I handed my keys back to the dispatcher. I refuse to drive any route that cuts through the empty interior highways of Nevada. Some roads belong to things that don't want us there, and I am not going back to find out what's behind that wooden smile.